After Hezekiah's father had closed the temple, filled it full of filth and defiled things, his son Hezekiah came along, and his son Hezekiah restored, repaired, cleansed the temple, reopened it so that the people of God could worship. Hezekiah refused to abandon the Lord, and he refused to abandon God's house. Now, after all of the temple was reopened and the people were bringing all of their tithe into the storehouse, I want you to notice 2 Chronicles 31, beginning with verse 5. When the people of Israel heard these requirements, they responded generously by bringing the first share of their grain, new wine, olive oil, honey, and all the products of their fields, and they brought in a large quantity, a tithe of everything they produced. The people who had moved to Judah from Israel and the people of Judah themselves brought in the tithes of their cattle, sheep, and goats, and the tithe of the things that had been dedicated to the Lord their God, and they piled them up in great heaps. They began piling them up in late spring, and the heaps continued to grow until early autumn. When Hezekiah and officials came and saw these huge piles, they thanked the Lord and his people Israel. Notice that not only thanked God, they thanked the people of Israel. Where did all this come from? Hezekiah asked the priests and the Levites. And Azariah, the high priest, I love this, from the family of Zadok replied, since the people began bringing their gifts to the Lord's temple, we have enough to eat and plenty to spare. The Lord has blessed his people, and all this is left over. Why is there abundance in God's house? When people talk about God prospering a local church, why is there abundance in God's house? Because the pastor raises money, because the pastor knows how to manipulate the people to give money? No, why is there abundance in God's house? Because God has blessed his people. Now, I often have pastors ask me, Pastor Sumrall, how do you take an offering and how do you do this? And I look at them and say, there's nothing to teach you, because most of the time my offering thoughts have nothing to do with money. I said, I work very hard, both in prayer and in teaching, to see the blessings of God come upon people, because I just believe that God's people want to do what's right. I really do. I just believe if God will bless his people, that there will always be abundance in God's house. And I base that on this passage of scripture. So people say, why has God been so good to COP? Because God has blessed his people. Why is there abundance in any church? Because God has blessed his people. Pastors, rather than trying to figure out how to take an offering like a televangelist and get money out of people, why not spend more time in prayer, asking God to bless his people? Why not spend more time teaching the people how to fear God and serve God and follow God, so that the blessings of God will come upon his people? When God's people are blessed, there's abundance in God's house.